we have to evolve and adapt ourselves to the changing economic scenario and the education scenario at the same time. Now, how to evolve and adapt to the changing dynamic of the education industry? There are so many things which have been happening in the past. When we talk right from education 1, which came in the initial days when education started, it was more of an authoritarian thing. That is, the teacher was the dictator in the class. The student was just a passive recipient, a small lamb sitting in the classroom. Allow me to use that word. The teacher-centered system, the teacher gives knowledge, and he was the absolute leader in the class. There was nothing to say about any student intervening in between. Technology was forbidden in the classroom at that point of time. Let's have the first slide first. Start from the first slide. I'll just keep on completing it by 5:15, don't worry. Can you have the first slide?
Yes, sir. You are at the first slide.
No. Just before that, let me have the topic first.
Yeah, this is the topic slide.
No. This is education 1. The first slide is different.
Okay. Godse sir, if you are hearing, just go to the first slide.
Yeah, can we go? If not possible, doesn't matter. Let's start from here.
Godse sir, just go to the first slide.
If you can't go to the first slide, doesn't matter. There must be some technological problems. No, just to revisit the topic. This is COVID-19 issues and challenges in execution of Education 4. In fact, what I have told you is, let's keep on going, because I myself, as I have told you, sometimes you have to think out of the box, but it is my habit individually as a human being and as a vice chancellor that I usually try to think out of the box, or rather no box at all. I have been known to break rules and set up new norms wherever I have been in the past. So it is not like that you have to do it every day, but sometimes you have to go ahead with that. So in the first slide, I have just told you what is education 1. Next, go to the next slide. Education 2, what was that? This way it is taking a lot of time, I think.
No, it is already,
anyway, I'll
sir.
proceed.
It is already.
Okay, education. Okay, next slide, please. Education 2. In this set of industrial revolution, when industrial revolution 2 was there and education 2 had to be compatible to it, communication and collaboration was starting to grow. There was an exam based approach. The result is the examination memorization of knowledge. An underestimated student-centered approach, very initial phases of a student-centered approach where the student started holding some importance. We call it that way, but we don't apply it right now. That means we say that we are trying to have a student-centered approach, but there was no approach of this kind. Some people think they stopped talking about teaching and they talk about learning and learning outcomes, but it was all on paper. In education 2, the schools were still talking about hours of teaching. How many hours have a teacher taught? Nobody asked as to what were the contents that were delivered. So this is how it went in education 2. When we came to education 3, next slide, please. So when we came to education 2 continued, it is invasion of technology and social networking. The next slide, please. Technology and social networking started invading the entire scenario. Now we applied technology to the classroom as a trend indicator, but the class continues to have the same structure. The class had the same structure, but technological application initially started. There was complete confusion during education 2. Students knew the technologies better than the teachers at that point of time. No design for what is used and what is not. Many choices were there. The system cannot properly follow the evolution of technology. There is no teacher training at that time. Data was scattered everywhere. Google fast searches faster from traditional libraries. The web knows more than our teacher right now. The classmates communicate faster and smarter electronically. They collaborate on plans. Students give technical knowledge to their teachers. So it was all a bit hazy at that point of time. The students were having a better approach. In Education 3, I would just run through it. It was a student-centered approach. This is how actually education stabilized during the third industrial revolution. The teacher is transformed into a coordinator, facilitator, advisor, learner, and practice guide. This was the start of the moment when a teacher could be more transformed into a coordinator, facilitator, not at that point of time to that extent. The student is researching, the student starts researching now. Flipped classroom method also starts applying. More dialogue, technology is everywhere, the student is self-learning and everywhere. The classical style classroom no longer exists. Next, please. Education 4. In Education 4, co-creation and innovation in the center. The heart of Education 4 in Industrial Revolution 4 is co-creation. Create knowledge together, and innovation is the center. The centric point to all education is innovation. Now, whenever and wherever, flipped classroom applied interactive practical exercise face to face. Now, flipped classroom started in Education 2 also to some extent, but there was no interaction and practical exercise, face-to-face interaction at that point of time. Learning is done at home or outside the school. While in school, students develop skills. So learning was usually done outside the school. Development of personalized teaching and learning. Education 4 signifies development of personalized teaching and learning. Learning plans now in Education 4 will be called creativity plans by most of the organizations. Let's have the next slide, please. Actually, the people are not able to see. I think there's some hiccup. The technology is free and easily accessible at this point of time. Increased use of virtual reality, continuous evaluation and innovation. And therefore, there is a need for continuous training and development of new knowledge and skills by all. Can't we move the slide further, please?
Yes, sir, it moved.
It has not moved. I have completed the next slide also, please.
This is COVID-19 slide, sir.
No, please go ahead. Next slide now. What basically again is the approach of Education 4. This is still Education 3 you are on, sir.
Sir, might be what we are seeing is not at your end. It is visible because we are far ahead with that slide. We are at COVID-19. Okay. I mean, I think.
Oh no. I'm just before that. Introduction. What is Education 4? No, it is a desired approach to learning that aligns itself with the emerging fourth industrial revolution. We have to align this Education 4 with the emerging fourth industrial revolution. This industrial revolution focuses on smart technology, artificial intelligence and robotics, all of which now impact our everyday lives. I'll just give you a brief of these slides and then I'll be talking out on my own. For universities or institutes to continue to produce successful graduates, they must prepare their students for a world where these cyber physical systems are prevalent across all industries. It has to be prevalent across all industries. This means teaching students about this technology as a part of curriculum, changing the approach to learning altogether, and utilizing the technology to better improve the higher education experience. Now, when we talk about COVID-19 now, to bring it in relation with Education 4, I think this pandemic has changed the scenario and it has caused a major technology disruption. We all are aware of that. As soon as this pandemic was initiated, most of the educational institutions I have talked to, and I'll give you all practical examples, not going completely into theory now. Even schools or higher education institutions, some who didn't have the technology upgradation done already, because it was all so sudden, they tried all methods. Like Mr. Sharma probably said, they talked about synchronous and asynchronous methods. Both methods were adopted by everyone. People started uploading video lectures on the YouTube. People sent course materials on the email. People started uploading things on the website. Whatever they could lay hands on, they were doing when the pandemic started initially. Slowly, gradually, things started settling down. Many of the organizations who didn't have an LMS, learning management system, they got it in place. So technology disruption is here to stay now. The problem right now is that of connectivity, accessibility, and capability. Now, if I give an example of the university where I am Vice Chancellor, IC University, we have a good number of students who belong to the hilly areas and rural areas. We are not situated in a, say, city, big city or a metropolitan city. So the problem now is that of connectivity, the speed, the accessibility with gadgets, and at the same time, the capability of the teachers as well to some extent. So the teachers have done a wonderful work everywhere across India. What to talk about India, I think across the globe. So when we talk of connectivity, I think I've just gone through and surprised by a speed test global data that in terms of mobile broadband, India is ranked 171 in the world, and in terms of fixed broadband, we are 72 in the world. So right now, with the 4G in place, still we are lacking quite behind, and we have to do our best. Except in the cities, I think connectivity in most of the rural areas and villages is not proper. There are many first learners with us. Giving you an example, first learners, I mean that their parents have never been to a school or college before. About in numbers, about 50 to 70 of them. So what to talk about trying to instruct or give knowledge to their parents regarding this? In the school system, I have seen parents sitting with the small children while the teachers have been teaching. So we have to think positively about connectivity, accessibility, and capability if education 4 is to come as a sustained education system, and this sustainability has to come in coordination with the Industry 4 revolution. Now, when we talk about capability, there's nothing, I'm pointing a finger not at the faculty members, because once I say that as good corona warriors as the health workers, the security forces, everyone has done a lot of human service for the nation. Yet I think we have not, or we have failed to term our teachers across the country as corona warriors. They are also one of the corona warriors in my opinion, because I have seen teachers right from morning to evening trying to not only teach children, small children, higher educational institutions, students of graduation and undergraduate students, teaching them online, trying to give them the best, trying to talk to them, counsel them. So all this has been happening, and it is a big system which India has. Now, if I give you a certain statistics, which I'll be talking apart from all these slides, you must be aware that India is the youngest country in the world right now with half the population below the age of 27. 60 crore of Indians are below the age of 25, say 25 to 27. 60 crore are 25 years and below. 30 crores are in school. Will you believe the numbers? Just see the numbers. 15 lakh schools. 30 crore children in schools. 13 crore only from 9 to 12 standard. When we talk about the higher educational institutions, see the figures and the numbers. 1,000 universities, 40,000 colleges, institutes, and higher education institutions other than universities. 14 lakh faculty members, 3.74 crore students. The enormity of the proposition right now. So you cannot play the blame game, because COVID-19 has been a sudden issue where we were almost all caught unawares initially. But keeping this in mind, everyone has been, excuse me. Yes, please. So when we talk about capability, for instance, the retraining of our teachers has become very important, because even very senior professors I have seen, They can be very good teachers in a classroom. But when it comes to a virtual classroom and uploading courses which are in tandem to what is required on an online teaching platform, sometimes we have to use technology and they have to upgrade and upskill themselves. So the development of the curriculum is also changing. The curriculum development style, the sort of course curriculum to be developed will change over a course of time when Education 4 is there. The upskilling process for all faculty members has to be at the maximum. The role of educator is going to change. That means maybe if we were more of an information provider earlier, in most of the government schools and some of the private organizations as well, we have to change that thing. Because after uploading all the course materials and study materials, the student must be able to understand and apply that elsewhere. Yes? Now, therefore, when we talk about...
I'm sorry, sir. It is a request to participants that please mute at their end because it should not create a background noise. This is a gentle request to all participants. Please mute at your end. Yes, sir. Please continue.
Yeah. So I'm talking about all those things because I have to build a connect between the COVID-19 and what are the issues and challenges in terms of having a good Education 4 setup and sustainable Education 4 system during this IR 4. So this online teaching method versus classroom teaching is being debated in many of the webinars I have been in almost about 40-50 webinars of elite people being there on the platform. And I tell you, if I am very honest, even the best of the best are not able to project or predict what exactly the new normal is going to be after a year or two. But of course, we have to consider this challenge as an opportunity. We have to think as to how best we can perform. If we talk about the students, you know that Gen Z and Alpha, these are the two sorts of children we have right now. Gen Z who have reached up to the age of 25 years. Mostly these are the students who are there in the schools and colleges, mostly. Where Alpha are the preschoolers. Now, Dell Technologies has given a research, has done a research and said that about 85% of the jobs which these Gen Z and Alpha students will be taking in 2030 has not been invented as yet. So if it has not been invented, things are so disrupted by this pandemic right now, and technology has come to stay in a different way. What we could have thought we would achieve in the next 5 years, I think we have achieved in 45 days. I can say that with conviction. What we had thought we would be implementing in the next 5 years, we have already achieved in these 45 days. And I think that the sustainability of this technology being there is going to be there for the times to come. And we have to understand that we cannot live with this. Even the generation, the millennials, have to understand that their children who are the alpha population of India, in fact, they have been born with technology. They have been born with technology, and so they want instant access to technology as well as to a feedback, which is through either say through the teachers, through the parents, or whomsoever they would be. They want instant feedbacks because they are technologically so sound. So we have to teach them according to that. Now, introduction to the pandemic we have already done. We'll talk about psychosocial well-being later on. So let's have the next slide. Have you taken the next slide, ma'am?
Yes, sir, it is there.
Okay. Now, can COVID spur Education 4? Now, this outbreak of this pandemic has already forced institutions, as I said, to foray into the virtual space. However, they should use a unique model of digital and physical interaction that enhances learning, innovation, and working. That means sooner or later, we are going to open up. That is for sure. One pandemic had come almost 100 years before. things were almost similar, except that the nature of the pandemic at that point of time was a bit different from what it is now. We are technologically more sound. So for us, things have come in a different way. So it is not to say that human civilization had finished after the pandemic in 100 years before. So we have to be positive. Things will settle down. But what we have to do is in the classroom and in the educational institutions, that we have to use both the digital platform, a blended learning methodology, in which both physical interaction and digital have to be there, that everyone knows. So next slide, please.
Yes, sir, it's there.
Yeah. Now, what will be the main weapons? The one is social distancing, we all know about. But what social distancing will do, it will hit at the heart of learning and innovation process in academic institutions, that is for sure. We cannot expect what we would be doing in the classroom. For example, it would be very telling on the infrastructure and on the faculty when the classroom teaching starts again. And suppose in a class of 60, we divide it into 3 classes. How many faculty would be teaching in each? How much load would the infrastructure be taking? For instance, in Denmark, if we give you an example, which is just out of context maybe here, Denmark has earmarked 6 square feet in the classroom for each child, and even on the playground 6 square feet for each child. Will it be possible for us to do in India, where in the schools and in the colleges and universities, the density of population of students is so great? Will it be possible for us? I don't think so. So social distancing is going to hit the learning and innovation process in the, at least 6 months or a year, and things will then stabilize. Learning and innovation mainly are fundamentally social processes. We all know that. It cannot exactly be done in isolation. The quality of interaction among a diverse nature of people, when a student comes to a college, naturally he is not come here simply to attend a class and gain information. He or she can get it from multiple places in this particular technologically savvy world. So he has to interact or she has to interact, and that is going to be hit. This is just the challenges I'm talking about. Academic institutions are not just teaching shops right now. They have research labs, incubators, research parks, various R&D activities, organizations, sports, so dramatics. So there's so many things which happen, which have social connotations. Now, 3 interventions must be considered to use this crisis and develop a unique mix of digital and physical interaction, which enhances learning and innovation. Next slide, please. Now, what is the push for the deep digital? It is time for all the institutions to embrace digital in a big way in core academic activities, including administrative processes, I must say. When we do a serious assessment of our everyday activities, we have to ensure that does not generate value from co-presence is moved to the digital world, including remotely performing routine lab experiments. We have to somehow initiate virtual lab experiments for the students for online courses. We have started developing it at our own university. Some virtual labs which the teachers would be exhibiting to the students. Of course, that is not as good as the student being in the laboratory itself. But instead of simply giving assignments, for example, taking assessment while doing an examination, we have also had some virtual labs shown to the children on the Zoom and other apps, Google Meet, and so many other technological platforms. Now, every course must be mandated to deliver at least 60% content online. So it would be very hard work for the teachers in the times to come when Education 4 stabilizes. That all these course materials have to be built differently. You have to rework. You have to actually unlearn, relearn. And then actually it has to be done on a very wide spectrum. It cannot be done in a day, I agree. But when we know that these online courses are there to stay, apart from MOOCs, apart from SWAYAM, apart from Coursera, so many other on-sites which the government has also been building, I think we as faculty members must be very clear that whatever subject we are teaching, we must be able to teach 60% content online, where the student not only understands the concept but is able to apply it also. We have to use a combination of video lectures, webinars, and online quiz assignments, etc. Now, most of the academic meetings also, such as class committees, project evaluation, doctoral committee meetings, must all be done online. I recently conducted one of the research development committee meetings for PhD scholars online, and even one of the 6 monthly PhD Viva online. So this has to be done. Then they cannot come to the physical presence system right now in the classroom. You have to do this. This kind of shift does not require huge investments also. We do have platforms. Right now during the COVID-19 crisis, many of such platforms are giving it free of cost also. So even small institutions, they have simply to be taught and told how to go about it. The real advantage of greater leverage of digital in improvement in attention and a better appreciation of the value of physical interaction. Now, how will you leverage this critical improvement in attention? You know what attention I'm talking about. I think you are very aware of the fact that right now every young, say, child of India, young child means up to the age of 25 or 26 years, is using 300 minutes of online or social media every day. This is a statistics, global statistics. And the attention span has been reduced to half. That means what was 10 years ago, almost 16 seconds, has come to 7 to 8 seconds at present. So any lecture which has to be uploaded on the video must have certain punch in it so that the student's attention span can be extended during the delivery of that lecture. It should not be a monotonous rendition of the things of the subjects as sometimes happens in the classroom, and yet we are able to control the attention of the student in the classroom, which we cannot do on an online platform with till the course material is so abrasive. Let's go to the next slide. Now, redesign for social distance. Push for deep digital. I think I've done this. So let's have the next one. Redesign for social distance. The physical, excuse me.
We have moved, sir.
We have not. Okay. It is time for institutions to embrace digital in a big way in core academic and administrative processes. No, I've done that. Please, attention, I've talked about. Next, push for deep digital, I've done. Let's have redesign for social distance.
Yes, sir. We were at.
Yeah. Okay, right, ma'am. The physical infrastructure that is released by shifting to digital must be redesigned. On one hand, I just talked about a burden on the physical infrastructure wherein class has to be divided into 3, for instance. On the other hand, other side of the coin, now I'm talking about is some of the physical infrastructure will be released by shifting to digital. So it must be redesigned to support learning and innovation activities that require close interaction among people, equipment, tools, prototypes, and organizations. There is a cost involved in that also. And especially private organizations like us, we have to be very clear that the cost must match the revenue. So at least we must be breaking even. So this cost would be involved, but we have to somehow invest if we have to go in for a long run and sustain our institution for a, say, a sustainable education force system. Next. Behavioral changes. Now,
yes,
self-discipline is required for both faculty and students to make best use of the co-presence, or even on the virtual medium. Here, encouraging faculty and students to adopt the principles of design thinking, such as curiosity to know, being present, attention to detail, gesture response, and improvisation are important. Actually, you know, when a good teacher is in a classroom also, and whenever he or she finds that the student's attention or bad body language is showing that the student is not able to concentrate right now, if the maximum number of students are not able to concentrate, you just drop the seriousness of the situation. You either give a small example, cite a case which may be humorous, which may again bring the students back into the classroom. This is how we all do. So even on an online platform, we have to encourage both faculty and students to adopt principles of design thinking. Like they have to design their lectures, they have to design their presentations, the way they are answering the questions. This has all to be responsive to each other. The necessity again to unlearn undesirable behaviors and start new ones that can enable learning and innovation. If institutions take steps in this direction, we can transform the COVID-19 threat into a new model of education for. Actually, we do have challenges, but I think this is a big opportunity right now in which we can simply transform more easily and quickly into the education for that is geared towards learning and innovation. I think this is a boon in disguise for in some ways to us. The pandemic, of course, has very bad say it cannot be called good at any point of time, but of course sometimes we have to find good from the bad also. Next one.
Yes, sir.
So we have talked about behavioral changes preparing students for evolving industries. Now cyber physical systems are steadily becoming more integrated into various industries. We all know that, inevitably affecting the skill requirements for employees. The skill requirement is completely changed for employees, especially when the education for is there. The research by McKinsey Digital revealed that due to the fourth industrial revolution, 60% of all occupations could potentially have at least a third of their activities automated. Now, if 60% of the occupations have a third of their activities automated, I think those activities which are performed by the human beings can still be performed if we have a true knowledge and true understanding of the technology, because technology simply cannot be used alone except in certain ways which I'll be explaining later. However, there is much more to consider than the potential disruption to the hard skills required for various job roles. So there is a potential disruption even to the hard skills for the roles. Next, please.
Yes, sir. Next.
Yeah. The fourth industrial revolution will also impact the soft skills that the students will need in the future. Everything is going to change. Now, in 2016, the World Economic Forum produced a report exploring these changes. They predicted that by 2020, that is the year here, they predicted in 2016. I'm quoting it because this is a year in which this was supposed to happen, and the COVID-19 has accelerated that process. More than a third of the desired core skill sets of most occupations will be comprised of skills that are not yet considered crucial to the job today. If that was what was envisaged in 2016, when everything was normal, do you think in an abnormal situation like that, the crucial skills needed would not be much more different and much more compromised right now? We have to think on that. Some of the soft skills like complex problem solving, social skills and process skills will soon become indispensable. Of course, we all know that. Technology also allows us to be constantly connected, and as a result, job roles are steadily becoming more flexible and adaptable. Right now, during this crisis, work from home has become a virtual norm for most of the MNCs and almost every educational institution. All teachers and all students are studying and working from home. So this has become a new normal. Initially, it had become a bit of a problem to adapt oneself to that, but everything has stabilized and people are doing it naturally now. Now, education 4 is about evolving with the times. And of course, we have to look at the future of the students also. Next slide, please. I'll just run through it because I think I have to speak some things on my
own.
own.
On the next slide.
Yeah. So a new approach to learning by just say aligning with the teaching and learning methods with the skills needed. The higher educational institutions can be sure they are successfully preparing their students for the fourth industrial revolution. We must know that we are doing it, and we must be very confident within ourselves and convinced that we are doing it. How we do it? By encouraging accelerated remote learning. We all know that remote learning is the name of the game right now, which is the idea that students will learn theoretical knowledge remotely using digital means whilst ensuring any practical skills that are still learned face to face. This is a more flexible way of learning that requires accountability and good time management, skills that will be relied on in the coming future. So let's have a next slide, please. I think I will have.
Yes, sir. We are on the next slide.
Yeah, please. Next. Have you?
We're on the next slide, sir.
What is the project-based learning we have talked about. Now, learning practices such as scale-up are increasing in popularity in some countries. What is a scale-up? A scale-up way of learning has students sit at round tables. Like, we have meetings in the offices. We have round table conferences and conclaves when I go to in Delhi or anywhere, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, anywhere. We have round tables where we sit scattered across the room, allowing the teacher to freely walk through the space and approach the students if necessary. This is a wonderful way of teaching. I have tried it in my past also. And if actually the students' attention span becomes totally concentrated on the teacher and the way it is going, they will interact with each other also. And it's a very positive attitude with which teaching goes on. Now, with this way of learning, students are also working out problems on laptops and whiteboards also, answering real-time quiz questions and helping each other learn. So this is how it goes. Next, please.
Yes, sir. We are on the next slide.
Yeah, the next slide says, it has not come. Let's have the next one, please. Teaching to learning, shifting focus has changed. Let's have the next. Education 4 needs to develop 4 skills after this. Now, to satisfy the next one again, to satisfy the needs of Industrial Revolution 4, job market and say develop globally competitive learners, Education 4 needs to develop 4 new skills. There are 4 new skills which need to be developed. What are the 4 new skills? This I think we have gone beyond, much beyond. The 4 new skills which have to be developed are, just a moment. Number 1 is critical thinking. Yeah. Looking at the problems in novel ways, associating learning subjects across discipline. Communication, sharing thoughts, ideas, questions, experiences, etc. Collaboration, working together in order to reach a common goal by putting experiences, talents, and smart work. And creativity, attempting new approaches through invention and innovation. So, but the most important, which I feel right now, are the 3 which have been mentioned in bold. Empathy, emotional intelligence, and third I will talk about right now. Empathy. We have seen a rise in empathy during the COVID-19 crisis. Everyone now starts thinking about the other, where we were not concerned with the have-nots. We were not concerned about our neighbors. We are not concerned about relatives and friends whom we have been talking to even after 20, 30 years in the past few days and months. That empathy part has been regenerated. I think we need to carry it forward. Emotional intelligence. The emotional stability of any student has to be looked into. This skill is very necessary. And the third one, which is now being talked about in various academic circles, is spiritual intelligence. We have to match our mind with actually what our with outside world. The matching of the mind with the outside world needs spiritual intelligence. And spiritual intelligence I will talk in short about just after completing the slide. Next, please. The vision for education 4 would be, first priority is ensuring that all students are well equipped to secure productive employment in their chosen career pathway. Now, there's going to be a difference in education 4 scenario. I'm telling you right now. Earlier, what we used to happen was, till date almost, that people used to think that I'm doing engineering and I would be employed somewhere, I would get a job, good. Now the career pathway has to be chalked right from some classes before. I'll give you an example. We are talking about entrepreneurship and startups. The Atal Innovation Mission has come into being, and Atal Tinkering Labs have been established in many schools across the country. They teach the students of 9th to 12th or 6th to 12th innovative ways in which things can be done in a practical application in society, in your classroom, anywhere. So these Atal Tinkering Labs would give them a boost to think about entrepreneurship, and that entrepreneurship trait would be start to develop within them right from the school days. So their career pathway starts from that moment only. They choose a career pathway. They don't choose a course, they choose a career pathway. And this is going to be the hallmark of education 4. And this should be the vision right from the school to the higher education institutions, to create a career pathway for the student, not just to keep him for a job. To achieve its first priority of efficient job placement. Okay, job placement is of course important, but I always believe that with a good mentor, like I have myself been subjected to very good mentorship during my school days, and I must tell you, not only my batch in school, but almost every batch pays homage to that one mentor who was the headmaster of my school. And I can tell you with conviction that whatever we are today, we are majorly because of what mentorship was given to him by him to us. So the Guru Shishya Parampara has to be rejuvenated somehow. Mentorship has to come into fore. We have to handhold our students. If we really want education for to be a sustainable process, if we really want our education for to match with Industrial Revolution 4, we have to handhold our students as teachers, and we have to ensure that we give to them the best possible we can. That means even better than what we possess sometimes. So the career development and career literacy into education at all stages starts at a much earlier age than is currently the case. Next slide, please.
Yes, sir. We are on the next slide.
Next slide. So
yes, we are already.
Okay. So actually, I'm not able to see now.
Just move for a moment.
Okay, how is artificial intelligence useful in tackling COVID-19? I'll just speed up my process. You've seen during this COVID-19 crisis that artificial intelligence and innovative technology has helped everyone fight the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, you know, in China, the initial AI, due to artificial intelligence, it was initially unearthed that there is a sort of a pneumonia which people don't know about. So that came into fore early in the early, say, even February or even much before that, I think August or September. This technology is helpful for proper screening, tracking, and predicting the current and future patients. So, you know, we are talking about thermal guns by which temperature of a human being is measured. But it requires human presence. A human being has to hold that thermal gun. So AI has enabled, say, many gadgets at the airports and various other lounges in multinationals and all across the world in many countries, where there is no handling of the process, and the AI can at airports, for instance, give the information that this particular individual is not wearing a mask, this particular individual is having a say temperature. So this can be done by AI. The major applications of this AI for early detection and diagnosis of the infection. This is also being done. CT scans, you know, CT scans have been giving information in a much quicker way by use of AI technology. Now, drugs and vaccines. So the workload of the healthcare workers is trying to be reduced. Telemedicine we are talking about. All this is based on say digital technology. Next slide, please. Let's go quickly. So
yes, sir. We're on the next slide.
Yeah, next slide is healthcare delivery requires the support of new technologies like Internet of Things, AI, IoT, big data, machine learning, and things like that. So we have to prevent and somehow try to fight out any other pandemic, whether it is COVID-19 or maybe even small say viral attacks of Ebola or whatnot. So we have to be very ready with these technologies. Development in IT has resulted in revolutionizing all aspects of life, and this revolution has been realized as Industrial Revolution 4. Because, you know, till there's a development in information technology, it cannot result in revolutionizing all the aspects of life. So our lives have been changed. It cannot remain the same. Next, please. In between, when the next slide comes, I'll talk about this for 5 minutes. I'll give you a small this thing that we should also think of having Indian traditional knowledge in our educational system. Means we are already talking about the use of yoga, meditation, pranayam, and whatnot. Earlier, people used to say smirk when you use such terms, yoga or pranayam. Now it has become the vogue of the day. People are using it daily. People are doing yoga daily. So why? That means the Indian traditional knowledge had those tenets which we never recognized on our own. Then we had Ayurveda. Even the government of India is saying, download the Arogya app. We are doing it. And they are telling us that the Ayush Mantralaya, the Ministry of the Ayush Ministry, would give us a combination of Indian spices and Indian Ayurvedic medicines with which you can improve your immunity during the COVID-19 crisis. So for anything to settle down, we must do our best, not only for ourselves, but for our students. Now, what is this wobbles for our new normal? I think some of you must be knowing it, but our Honorable Prime Minister, Narendra Modi ji, in one of his speeches, talked about vowels of a new normal, A, E, I, O, U. He said that as in English language, these 5 letters hold great importance. So in the post-COVID-19 world, when the pandemic ends, still these 5 letters will be very important for any business, for young people of the India, for any establishment. So I consider this to be as important for implementation of Education 4 in an IR4 era. What is A? A is adaptability. I said that earlier that we should have resilience and adaptability as 2 great qualities in us. And everyone has exhibited these 2 qualities during the COVID-19 crisis. We have to adapt ourselves to the situation and understand that this situation is not going to exist forever. We have to adapt, even change ourselves is needed, and with resilience, we have to live up to our best. So let's adapt the new technology, let's adapt anything which is new here, and go ahead to the next vowel, which is E, efficiency. What the Honorable Prime Minister meant was that right now we compare any productivity process with maybe with the number of hours put in. How many hours you took a class in a week? Every teacher is asked by a dean or a vice chancellor, for instance. You have a load of 12 hours a week or 16 hours a week. So what is this efficiency basically? What he means to say is that instead of just counting the number of hours, let's say relate efficiency to the productivity and to the achievement, the outcome. When we talk about the outcome-based education, maybe we have gone too ahead to transgress so many aspects. Efficiency would mean whether the student can become who can understand the concept and apply it to become a good global citizen also. This was his theory of efficiency. So a teacher's efficiency, a student's efficiency to learn. What is I? I is inclusivity. Now, when we talk about have-nots, I think before me also one of the speakers was speaking that of course have-nots are there. We have seen so many migrant laborers going to their home villages and towns. Though I am very sure that very soon you would be hearing that migration, reverse migration happening. Naturally, when industry is open, without laborers, nothing can happen. So inclusivity is any plans we make, any say project we make, whether it is Education 4 or Industrial Revolution 4, these two should match and have in context the inclusivity of the have-nots in the country. For instance, if we talk about technology, we say that telemedicine has been used by many people in approaching hospitals and doctors, which in this pandemic we could not have. But has the those who are very poor and do not have access to such technology, have they been able to access this particular opportunity? No, they haven't. So we have to make inclusive say designs of things in the times to come. O is opportunity. Opportunity is that it should be we have to find out an opportunity in every challenge right now. I'll give you one small example. After every economic recession which has happened, people have come up with big startups. I tell you, India mark my words, India is all set for an explosive entrepreneurial growth in the years to come after this pandemic completes. If you remember, after the big bubble burst, and just when the dot-com big bubble burst had come into being, just after that, some new startups came and they have become big right now. Now, when the Honorable Prime Minister talks about Make in India, when he talks about, say, making India the nerve center of the supply chain management of the world, he says that we should not try to catch up the curve of the growth curve, but we should be a part at the top of the growth curve. Because we must understand how to make best use of our own people, how to make best use of the technology which we can access, and how to make best use of the the diverse culture which we have. So this is opportunity. U is universalism. Now, universalism means that we have, this pandemic has not spared anyone, either on the basis of religion, caste, creed. We all know that. So in terms of education 4, we must know that when education 4 and industry revolution 4 have to be synchronized, that means synergy created. Universalism has to be a basic tenet of the entire procedure. We cannot remain isolated islands of excellence. Even organizations and educational institutions, let me give an example. Of course, every institution have a tie-up with a foreign university or so, but in the recent past, say about 6 months or so, we have tied up with some private universities in India. And IIC University and those private universities are exchanging video lectures on different topics. Suppose you are good at something, let's share our resources. Maybe it would sound very abnormal. And I always say that when there's a change, not all people accept the change initially, but once things started getting normal and started growing, people jump onto the bandwagon. So this sharing has to be there. I tell you, you cannot be in a position of strength right now in every aspect. So let's share our resources and come together. This is universalism. Now, when we talk about some other aspects, if I am not translating on time, I think I'll give you some 2 examples on something. The mental state.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am? Excuse me?
Yes, sir. Actually, we are getting very delayed, so
okay. Just
request to sum up.
Just 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. I'll give 2 examples only. How mentally strong we should be and make our students mentally strong. I'll give an example. Martina Navratilova, you must have heard about. She's one of the say best tennis players that the world has ever had in terms of women tennis. She was asked as to age the 43, how can you play such good tennis? The reply was that the ball doesn't know I am that old. And the real life which you lead and the real ground which you play on is just a 6-inch ground between the 2 years. So you have to think that way. Mentally, if you are strong, education 4, as teachers and as builders of educational institutions, we can make it sustainable. Then there is another small story I would like to tell you about. Just 2 minutes more. There was an individual from India who did his sciences with almost 98%, got into IIT Madras, then went to California in the University USA, did his MBA, got a very good job, married with a Tamilian lady, then he had a 5-bedroom house, what not. Then suddenly the economic depression came, and one day the news was heard that he committed suicide, shot his wife and child and shot himself. Now why? A man so successful, why did he do this? You know, let's keep one thing in mind. That individual was programmed for success and not trained how to handle failures. So I'll give a last message right now. Let's not only program the coming generation for success, let's prepare them to handle failures. Thank you so much. I would end my this thing on that. Thank you so much.
We apologize for the short time, sir.
No, it doesn't matter, ma'am.
That was a very informative session, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay,
now,
thank you so much.
Sir. Now we have Dr. Jesh. Yes, sir. Please continue.
Okay. No question answer sessions now. Just send me the questions if there are any. Okay.
Just
Hello.
Chandrani madam, I think wanted to
If
take.
any candidate has posting the questions through email if any candidates puts them forward.
Okay, that's fine. And a very good
Thank-
afternoon to Dr. Chandrani also. Dr. Chandrani, I can see you. How are you? Anyway.
Chandrani madam, please make your
Yeah,
sound
yeah.
on, audio on.
I am saying a very good afternoon to Dr. Chandrani.
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
had a very good
yeah.
Anyway,
Dr.
let's have the next question.
You graced the occasion, and actually I was driving while you were speaking, but the last part of your speech on education 4.0 and the necessities which are, whatever are the requirements which we have to fulfill as educational institutions. So that was very nice. Reskilling of the students and all, and thinking education differently. With respect to academic deliverance and with respect to the employment opportunities also. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much, and hope we meet physically also F2F in
Sure, ma'am.
now. Yeah.
This pandemic is going to end soon and we'll be meeting soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, moving on, we have with us Dr. Jayesh Minse, Deputy Dean, Central Placement Cell of Engineering and Dean, Central Placement Cell of Management, Head, Siagarh Institute of International Center. Sir has a vast educational background and a number of degrees to his name received from valuable universities through the globe. A recipient of vivid awards including Career Guru Visionary Award at National Employment Conclave by Aspiring Minds, Dronacharya Award by Bajaj Say India, and Sam Lexton Award for Best Teacher by University of Adelaide, Australia. Sir has presented many papers and is a keynote speaker and TED speaker in more than 20 talks. It would be privileged to hear from you, sir. Please take the charge.
Thank you. So, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Great, thank you. So,
welcome, Dr. Jayesh Minase. We welcome you on board for this two-day national webinar. Yeah, and we would be delighted to hear from you, Dr. Jayesh.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So, first and foremost, I would like to thank both Dr. Chandrani Singh, ma'am, and Dr. Daniel Singh, sir. It's for the first time that I'm presenting something like this on a platform of Sinhabit Institutes. I've presented a bit outside, but not at Sinhabit. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir, for the opportunity. And for the audience, please don't go by my Dronacharya Award. I'm a very young guy, just crossed my 40 a month ago. So I would like to start with where the previous session ended, where Dr. Kumar spoke about half of India's population being below 25. We call them the millennials. You know, being a faculty in Sinhabit, that is how I started at Sinhabit. I've seen a lot of these guys, the typical 20 to 25-year-old people who've got dreams, who've got desires, and who wish to lead a life on their own terms. Now, when we add that to the existing scenario, whether it is COVID-19, and I would not be too worried about COVID, but if we add that to the existing scenario of how the market trend is changing and what are the responsibilities on us as academicians and placement officers, I would like to share a few of my thoughts today. So I've not got a PPT as such. I'm just going to speak my heart out of my experience of last 15 odd years being abroad and being here in India and what I've seen. So my first sharing is for the 2020 graduates. You know, for last 2-3 months, since March 10th to be precise, I've had lots of discussions with parents giving me a call late in the night. I've had students giving me a call and they've inquired a lot about what is going to happen with their life, whether it is related to placements or whether it is about they going abroad. And today I would like to sum up it in terms of what Sundar Pichai said a couple of days ago through his video that was launched. And he said that if candidates can channelize their impatience and their frustration of this particular situation or their frustration against some technology which does not work the way they want it to work, and they keep an open mindset and they keep their hope, then life is going to be amazing. And I firmly agree in this. So, the 2020 graduates, I would like to tell you this, that it's not you and your batch only who went through this. I graduated back in 2000 and there was recession at that time. We go back to 1920s, there was a pandemic then as well, and the entire globe was suffering. There have been many batches which have come and gone, and every batch has suffered a bit through some issues. But if you want the world to remember you as a batch that made a change happen, then it is all in your hands. Whether you want them to remember you as an unfortunate batch or a batch that made the change happen. For all that, you need to channelize your impatience and your frustration of the situation with an open mindset, and you need to work hard, and things will be amazing. Now, like I said, what I'm going to talk about today is, of course, placements. That is my secondary role at CHEVET. So when we look at the market is very dynamic, and companies and their talent acquisition teams keep, I'm sorry, companies and their talent acquisition teams keep on searching for candidates who are best suited for the role. And that, believe me, is a challenge. You know, every year at Sinhagad, we see around 300 plus companies who come and recruit. And they always find it a challenge to make sure that they get the right person. Similarly, if you look at it from the perspective of an institute, then preparing a candidate who possesses such multiple skills, although it is not impossible, that also is a challenge. And finally, from the student's perspective, for them, it starts all from being illiterate about what is the world expecting from them, what is the world expecting as a skill set, what is the world expecting as a cultural change, social change, and whatnot, and how do they prepare for it. So it's very, very important that we all together, people like us who have the experience of failing in a situation, it was mentioned in the previous session as well. Let's teach the students how to rise out of a failure. I've always said this to my students that you are more talented than us simply because you have technology. Like 20 years ago, we did not have a mobile phone. Today, they have a smartphone with them. So they are always going to be better equipped when it comes to intelligence quotient. But what they do not have is experience. People like us have experience of not just succeeding, but failing and rising out of that failure and succeeding again. So it's very, very important that we help the students out of the situation. Now, my talk is about the paradigm shift. The biggest paradigm shift that I'm going to quote today is virtual placements. Now, this shift in virtual placements is not because coronavirus has hit us. Virtual placements, virtual recruitment procedures have been there since last 3-4 years. Might be they are not a fully automated process as yet. Like, for example, if you take a company like TCS, they have a national test which would assess a candidate, and based on the test, they do their interview. But what is happening surely is placements going virtual. And like I said, this has nothing to do with coronavirus. Might be coronavirus has kind of driven the point that virtual placement is the most important thing going ahead, and this is how we have to do it. We have no options left. But virtual placements came into picture because with virtual placements, companies are able to reach a deeper pool of qualified candidates. So basically, they can unearth and they can tap a talent, might be from Leh Ladakh, might be from a remote place like Hingoli in Maharashtra, might be from deep south in Kanyakumari, anywhere. This is because companies have always believed that world is a global village and hiring should not be confined only to a limited geography, and especially when they are talent hungry. So the job market is very talent hungry. They are after the talent. So they do not want to keep themselves confined to a limited geography. Also, they have been looking for candidates with specialized skills, with competency. So they are always on their toes as a talent acquisition division of any company or any industry for that sake. They're always on their toes and they are proactive to locate, to source, and to manage talent on a global basis. Now, what virtual placements has done is with the use of tools like, some of us have heard of Aspiring Minds, GoCubes, MeritTrack. There are many, many other players in the business, plus industries have come up with their own assessment platforms. So with the emergence of these so-called platforms, they are now able to reach the deeper pool of talent that is possible, and they are able to then unearth that talent. But at this juncture, let me also tell you is most of these current platforms, they have a bigger disadvantage. Like personally speaking, face-to-face placements would be a better option. However, with the situation, we have to go virtual. For example, like today we are doing a virtual webinar. But the biggest issue with virtual placement process is they are not able to gauge the emotional stability and the personality of a candidate. For example, when we are in a classroom and we see that a particular student is not contributing to the discussion or he is not meeting us eye into eye, we know something is wrong with him because we can see him entirely as a person, as a body. When it comes to virtual placement process, that is not always possible. And that is where virtual placements struggle. But adding the coronavirus situation, what has happened is, although we are not socially interacting physically, we are making use of technology to interact. And with that technology, students, like candidates, I mean to say, as well as the talent acquisition teams are searching for options where they can conduct their placement process virtually. And to teachers and to students who are in this session, I would request you take this point and make sure that the students are made aware that they need to be prepared for virtual placement processes. And that is my next topic. So if we go back few years, like, if we talk to the seniors who are there in this session, they would say that when they first applied for a job, they applied for a job because they found out about the job in a newspaper or in a magazine or so on and so forth. And they went for an interview, which was a face-to-face interview. You look at placement process today involves online assessments where a student is assessed on his aptitude, like his logical and quantitative abilities. He's assessed on his psychometry, that means he's assessed on his behavior and his personality. Like if, let's say, someone is meant to do marketing and sales, he has to be a fine line between being an introvert and extrovert. He can neither be an introvert, neither an extrovert. He has to be somewhere in between that. That is very, very important because he carries the image of his company. So psychometries are being conducted. Group discussions, interviews are being conducted on a platform like Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx, or companies have their own other platforms, or people are using Skype. But students are not used to platforms like these. And this was also mentioned in the previous session. So I'm just picking up on the points and I'm adding my version, and through my limited experience, I'm sharing my thought process. So it's very, very important that when it comes to virtual placement process, students prepare for this. I'll give a few examples from my own personal experience. We have an international recruiter based out of Japan. And that recruiter, he conducts his placements through an online test. Now, these online tests, which assess the domain knowledge of the student, are auto-proctored. Now, if students do not understand what this auto-proctored means, then what would happen is some students would not remember, or they would not realize, or they might do it casually. They would search for the answer somewhere else. So they might open a Google link, or they might open another web page, or they might have their friend who comes and gives them the answer. But auto-proctored tests would have the microphone on, they would have the webcam on, they would be finding out if you're searching for information anywhere on the internet, and they will catch you and the test will get locked. Now that is basically a lost opportunity. So it's very, very important that when students undergo a virtual placement process, And I'll again reiterate, most of the students are not used to this. It is important that they prepare. So few of the points that I would like to mention here is, first and foremost, even if the placement process happens virtually, it is very, very important that the student, let's say the student is undergoing an interview, it is very, very important that the student presents his professional side, even if the interview happens from his home. So he should be dressed professionally, he should speak professionally, he should be in an environment which is isolated, there's no noise around, suddenly there is no pet that walks onto his lap and jumps onto his lap. Parents do not shout out for a cup of coffee or something, or he does not have a visitor. Similarly, the candidate or the student should make sure that he checks out the application. Let's say the application is Zoom. What does it require as an operating system? What does it require as a hardware? What does it require as RAM, ROM, whatever it may be. Plus, he should check out his camera, his microphone. Like the easiest way is make sure that your camera is at your arm's length. So when you put your laptop or your desktop or your smartphone in front of you, the eyesight of your camera and your own eyesight should be horizontal to each other. So you look into the camera. So it's as if the interviewer is on the other side and you are talking to him face to face. Now that's very, very important. The microphone is only receiving your sound and no noise from elsewhere. That is also very, very important. Plus, the most important aspect or the primary aspect is preparing for such session. So if it's a group discussion or an interview, students should make sure that few days prior to that, they speak to the mirror, for example. After that, they should speak to their friends on a smartphone video conferencing. They should record their voice, because end of the day, the most difficult aspect we all find when we speak to a camera is we actually are looking at our own face and some other faces. And that kind of leads to confusion, that leads to problems to us. So it's very, very important that preparation happens. Now, this is the most important paradigm shift, virtual placements, for which students need to be prepared. Now, the few other paradigm shifts that I can speak of here are, if we go back few years, companies, when they conduct the recruitment drive, they would ask, what is your academic score? Can you communicate well? And they would assess that. If you look at the companies and their talent acquisition teams that come and visit for the placement process, if you look at them today, they ask the student, which school did you go to? What is the best thing about your college? What have you learned in your college? Have you participated in extracurricular, co-curricular activities? What awards have you won? What have you done for social cause? If not, having worked in an industry to gain experience on your skill set, have you done a virtual internship? Have you participated in different clubs in your college? And so on and so forth, because they want to gauge what sort of experience does the candidate have. They also want to check their technical proficiency. Like, a few years ago, they would say that if you have communication, if you've got good academic scores, we will train you. But now, like for last 2 days, everyone has been hearing these words of AI, machine learning, IoT, robotics, big data, might be cloud computing through Microsoft, through Google, through AWS, and so on and so forth. But these are the things that the company is looking for. Along with this, the company and its talent acquisition team is searching for the right candidate who has the right attitude, who has the right personality. So his attitude will not lead to issues in the company. His personality and his personality will make sure that he carries the image of the company on his shoulders, because at the end of the day, he is the company tomorrow. So they want to make sure that the personality and the attitude are correct. They want to make sure that the candidate is a cultural fit. They do not want someone who is very skewed on the criteria. So that is something that is evolving day in, day out, because now the world is a global place. Along with this, might be some companies would say that, we want the candidate to learn foreign languages, German, Japanese, Chinese, French, Spanish, whatnot. Companies are also making sure, and this happened to me a couple of days ago, we have a new recruiter that joined with us. Last year, they did like 100 placements. And they were very happy. And because they are new in Maharashtra, they said, can you help us brand ourselves? Now, for us, branding is of a product, but companies also want to brand themselves. So companies are not only using social media to promote job openings and to source profiles, but they are also using social media to brand themselves so that to the potential candidates, they can inform that, yes, we are the place where you should work. And that is where they are using social media platforms. What companies have also started doing is they have decided to do something like a virtual internship, which is called as virtual onboarding. So under this virtual onboarding, companies are making students undergo webinars, they're making students undergo training, they're making students undertake a project and showcase how good are they technically. So whatever their CV said on the domain side, do they match that CV or do they walk the talk? Plus, they are making students undergo virtual internship. This is to make sure that the day the students graduate, they have a seamless transition from academia to industry. So this is something that is adding up in the company specific, changes that we can observe. One more change that I have seen lately is many companies, and this is for students who unfortunately, because of some other issue, have a physical disability. They should also not be worried because companies these days are hiring people with disabilities, the so-called PWDs, people with disability. Companies hire them. Why do the companies hire them? It's because such candidates have low attrition levels, they're very productive, they're very motivated, and they can handle complex situations. They can handle failures better because they themselves have seen that from very close quarters. So these are certain changes that we have been observing. Now, when we look at it from the student's perspective, what you would realize is if you talk to any student today, uh, or if you talk, let's go a few years back again here, most of the candidates few years ago would be searching for a job which would offer them salaries and benefits, and that's about it. Possibly my generation, 20 years ago. And some of us were worried, like whether we would get a weekend off. Some of us were worried what would be the advancements, so on and so forth. But today's candidates, they are very open with their thought process and they're very clear in their head. So they want to know what is the culture in the company like. Who are the employees of this company? Where do they come from? How do they treat a fresher in the company? What does the upper management value the most? For example, how are the problems met and solved? When allocation of work is done, how is the allocation done? Is it to the senior or is it to someone who's got the talent and he deserves to get that opportunity? Is work from home allowed? In case of career advancement, let's say the company is the MNC, does it permit the student to go abroad to upgrade his qualification and then join? So there are many such things that students are thinking of. So the paradigm shift is not just in terms of virtual placement processes that are happening, but paradigm shifts are also in terms of how the candidates are thinking. Paradigm shifts is also in terms of how companies are using social media, how companies are now interviewing the candidates, what are they looking at, so on and so forth. Now, this webinar being about Education 4.0 and Industry 4.0, I cannot leave my session without speaking on that. And I'm just going to speak a little bit about how things have changed. I remember my days as an engineer, and I remember that classrooms were all about teaching. Now, if you look at things today, over the 2 days, people have said about lots of different platforms like Coursera, edX, MOOCs, YM, Udemy, so on and so forth. If you look at how teaching, or let's put it this way, how information is being shared or transmitted to the student, it is now remote and it is personalized. So the student or the candidate can learn from anywhere. At the same time, the candidate can learn what he wants to learn. And this is something that is very, very important. We cannot put every candidate in the same weighing scale and weigh them. Every candidate is different. We all are God's gift. We all come with different speeds in our processor. We all come with different memory sizes, so on and so forth. We all come from different upbringings, different cultures. So it's very, very important that students, when they are undergoing this so-called learning, which is self-learning, we as teachers also accommodate that change. And in our classrooms, we look at, let's say, problem-based learning on a live project, simulation of that project work, field studies, role plays, so on and so forth. Because what this will do is that when we actually integrate Education 4.0, and we all are firm believers that for Industry 4.0 to succeed, Education 4.0 has to support. And for Education 4.0 to support, students of today who have a smartphone, who have a laptop, who have internet connectivity, who have 1 GB of data, they are going to self-learn. So we as teachers should get into the role of counselor. As a peer, we need to get into the role of mentor and help them out. For example, when students search for some information or a course, we as a mentor should advise them whether that is the course that they should be doing. If they learn artificial intelligence online, or in that if they learn machine learning, or if they learn robotics, or if they learn big data or IoT or whatever, in the classroom, we should have a discussion with them on this. We should make them apply the knowledge so that they can upgrade their skills. And while academia is doing an amazing job in connecting this industry institute bridge, placement department, and because I also come from placement, I'm going to say this, placement department has a very, very big role to play here. Placement department needs to understand that beyond organizing placement drives and understanding what the company's requirements are and pitching them to the academia and they preparing the students for it, we need to make sure that industry and academia is on a platform where they can interact, they can discuss, and they can execute different strategies. And it's a win-win situation then for everyone, because then for the placement department, the academia is able to prepare a student who has those multiple skill sets. And for industry, they are happy that the placement department has given them the best of the potential candidates. Now, what this will also do is if we start decoding what the industry is looking for, if this so-called Education 4.0, which people have spoken about over the last 2 days, is applied, then candidates will be able to skill themselves in people and team orientation, self-development and self-awareness. They would be able to build an analytical mindset, a self-learning mindset. Candidates would be able to learn how to be creative and innovative. Even if, let's say, they are engineers, they would be able to imbibe in themselves business and entrepreneurial orientations. They will have cross-cultural orientation, which is also a big requirement. Along with this cross-cultural orientation, they will be sensitive to social issues, because let's say tomorrow a candidate becomes a president or he becomes a leader of a pack, then understanding his team culturally and socially is also very important. If we are able to, let's say, implement these role plays in the classroom, which are based on real life situations, then candidates will be able to solve problems, they will be able to offer solutions, they will be able to deal with uncertainties and changes. And this is something that the industry is currently expecting. And along with this, of course, the industry, when they expect a candidate not just to have a degree, but to have updated knowledge, like, when you read the reports of World Economic Forum, you would realize that half of the jobs are now automated. Now, if a job is automated, does it not require a human being? It does require a human being. The basis of Industry 4.0 is on the fact that it expects humans and machines to interact to unearth ideas that people could have just, possibly not even dreamt of 100 years ago. Like Industry 1.0 was about engines. Industry 4.0 is about intelligent machines and human talent, which is God's gift, integrating for a better tomorrow. So definitely candidates are going to require, irrespective of whether they are MBAs or they are MCAs or they are engineers, even doctors. In my house, I have doctors galore. All of them are required to know computing languages. They are required to know hardware, softwares in computers. They're required to know network. When it comes to engineers and business graduates, they are definitely expected to know programming. They are definitely expected to know computing things and so on and so forth. So it is very, very important that if Education 4.0 and Industry 4.0 has to succeed, we have to make sure that when students are self-learning, teachers, when they transmit their knowledge, they are acting as mentors and counselors, like I said. And at the same time, to facilitate this better, teachers also need to update their own knowledge. Because unless and until we all remain agile, things are not going to change. Like if the student keeps on going a step ahead, or if the teacher is a step ahead and the student is not, how can we integrate? Now, there is a fine line here that I want everyone to think of, and most of you would be. It's important to also remember that while doing so while implementing and while imbibing these lifelong and continuous learnings in the students, we understand the individual, we understand their personal choices, we understand how they are going to learn, whether they are going to learn fast or slow. So what is their learnability? We need to understand the culture that they come from, the upbringing that they come from. So we need to make sure that we have their SWOT before we decide or they decide to walk on this difficult path of learning so that they have a better tomorrow. So it's very, very important that we all collectively understand every individual, and through some continuous assessment process, which most of the institutes are implementing, we are able to make sure that every student is able to realize their own dream. And for students, I want to say this, I've heard a lot from students that they are based out of remote locations and at times it is difficult. Agree that situation, time, environment is difficult and is different for everyone. It is very important to always remember that we should find a way out to solve the issues. Issues are going to be there, but if we do not improve ourselves, if we do not make ourselves something which the industry is looking for, then we will not have that job. If we do not have that job, we will not have a better life. This is as simple as it is. So there is always a pathway, provided we are hopeful and we are open that yes, I want to do this, I will do it, and I will work hard towards it. So irrespective of the culture and the upbringing, let's say for example, if some students are just not allowed to speak at home, it does not mean that they remain introvert for the rest of their life. They need to find ways, they need to participate in activities to improvise themselves. So with all this, I would like to share my concluding remarks. Now, I started with the fact that the so-called Generation Next, the millennials, they form the major share of today's total workforce. Now, these youngsters, they have been taught by all of us to lead a life of their choice on their own terms. So these people are constantly on a lookout for better opportunities. Now, when they are on a lookout for better opportunities, they are going to have one foot outside the organization, wherever they work. So it is very, very important that this demanding generation, for this demanding generation, we should develop ourselves to manage their expectations. That is very, very important. So as we set out to understand the current recruitment landscape, we also need to remember that tomorrow again there will be another paradigm shift, and the same would translate into an unimaginable transformation. Now in this, the key to survival is going to be to remain agile for every one of us. If we are agile, that means if we make sure that looking at the market requirement, looking at the future, we prepare our next generation. We prepare our students so that the right talent pool, a competent talent pool, a talent pool that delivers timely and effectively, has got all the required skill sets is available. For that to happen, and for the talent pool to be a nearly perfect fit to the requirement, it is important that we remain agile as an institution, and the placement department and the academia integrate, and the placement department makes sure that the industry integrates with the academia so that we understand the requirements and we prepare the students for that requirement. So to end with, Industry 4.0, for it to succeed, it requires Education 4.0. For Education 4.0 to have a successful venture, it requires that the students understand that what they are expected of, or a student 4.0 is required. Similarly, a faculty 4.0 would be required. Even a placement department 4.0 would be required, of course, and infrastructure 4.0 is required. It is not impossible. The world has done it. We have done it. There are many issues that will come across, but if we stick together, all these issues can be sorted and we can have a better tomorrow. With this, I thank you for being patient listeners, and I conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a delight to hear from you. That brings
you.
us to the end of our 2-day national webinar. I'm sure all of us would have gained a lot from this webinar, and it would have motivated us to get through these times and see into the brighter other side of this pandemic. I would thank all the speakers, the organizers, and a special mention to Dr. Daniel Penkar and Dr. Chandrani Singh for organizing this webinar, and also all the participants here. Thank you all.
So on behalf of Safeguard Institute of Management, we are thankful to all the participants. We are thankful to all the organizing committee members. We are thankful to Dr. Chandrani Singh, Dr. Daniel Penkar, and all the speakers who has tried their time, who has given their precious time, and you have also given your precious time to join these sessions and mark this session as a grateful session. So we are thankful to you, and we are summing up, concluding this webinar. Hope we will go ahead with the next seminar sessions, and you will attend on the same. We will be sharing the feedback link on the WhatsApp groups or your email IDs. I hope we are expecting that you fill the feedback form and receive the certificates. By this remark, I'm just ending this webinar session. Thank you very much.